and welcome to Beyond the Calories with Hermien. Hermien, who are you?
Such a big question. I think it's something that I posted on our Kickstart group, the one that I'm on with that you're coaching us. I feel I'm deeply multidimensional, but to zero in, I would say that I'm a professional speaker and I'm a facilitator of development processes. And by that, I simply mean that I help organizations rumble with the uncomfortable conversations when it comes to employee wellness. So my focus is on what they call the invisible disability, which is mental health and mental illness. As somebody who is diagnosed with chronic depression and ADHD, and knowing how that does affect the way that you show up, but also knowing that with the right tools and knowing how to manage these things, that you can show up in a way that is wholehearted and do brilliant work in any space, to the point where I actually believe it is a superpower. And because number one, it makes you a lot more empathetic, and empathy is something that's required in the work that I do, especially in employee wellness. And ultimately, it's speaking the things that are unspeakable and doing it in a way that is psychologically safe, so that when people step into workplaces, they truly feel like they belong, which is they feel seen, heard, and valued, regardless of whatever it is, whether it is gender, whether it is race, whether it is disability, whether it is invisible disability, that we honor the lived experiences of people when they enter workplaces. So that is what I do. And yeah, who I am is, I think, just a human being who's really trying to lean into understanding. And I don't think there is any understanding, but at least having a human experience that is not riddled with suffering. I'm tired of suffering, really.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, this journey obviously started somewhere. Um, when did it start for you? When did you realize that this was your path?
Say, when I look back at my life, like even my childhood, I think it's been a long time coming. Having been sent to boarding school at the age of 5.5, and then having then that wound at a very young age of rejection and abandonment, it's informed a lot of things. It's informed the way that I have, interacted with people, my fear of just living. And that is, I think, where emotional and chronic binge eating or compulsive binge eating really became a thing for me, because while trying to seek to be accepted and approved and liked by people, which is an inside job. And I read something the other day that said, "Dear people pleasers, are the people pleased?" And people are. It doesn't matter how hard you try and people please, people aren't pleased. And as a result, I think I learned how to turn to food for comfort. So from a very young age, and almost an age that a person shouldn't be battling with issues around their weight, I think it must have been 12 or 13. I already started looking at myself in the mirror and judging and breaking myself down and wanting to look different. And so my issues with myself and my weight and my self-confidence and my self-worth started at a very young age. And obviously they've come through to adulthood with me. I would say, though, that the process of healing and the process of then entering this work, and not just the external work that I do, the work that I get paid for, but the internal, must have started in 2013, when I stepped onto the scale and I saw that I'd gone beyond, not the calories, but beyond 100 kilos. And I realized, okay, now it's time to start doing something. And so I started, but once again, no information, no, you know, you go to Google and, once again, it's one of those do this and then it's a 30-day this and it's a 28-day this. And so obviously none of that was working. And it was in 2016, um, on one of the, you know, uh, fitness and weight loss communities where I
Hermien.
then, yes, I was busy looking at, I was busy reading somebody's post and I saw you comment. And I don't even remember what it is that you said, but I remember how you said it. And I remember what I felt when you said it. It felt so thoughtful and it just felt safe. And safety is such an important thing for me. And because I'm neurodivergent, you start recognizing patterns and you start seeing that the way a person speaks and the way that they say a certain thing must mean that there's, that there's some foundation that this
Mm.
person has. So I think I remember replying on that comment that you made and I asked, are you a coach? And because I think obviously my brain I was like, no, no one else could have answered in that way if they didn't have some level of training or education. And you said you were. And I think that's when my journey with you started. And though it's been on and off, it has been very interesting because I haven't really been coached before, but anyone who's been on a weight loss journey, you've been in groups and you've been in WhatsApp groups and you've you're in communities where information is being shared. But for the first time, I felt that information was being shared with me that was actually deeper. And it's hard to explain. And even though, like, I mean, I had a lot of resistance in the beginning. I think when I started working with you, a ton of resistance because it went against everything. The
That's
amount of food I felt like I was being given. It was so, I mean, I remember I had times where I even questioned if I should be being coached by you because it was my brain was short circuiting because it was almost the opposite of everything else, but everything else hadn't worked.
I agree with you. I know that I get that response from clients all the time. Too much food, not what they used to. Um,
Why are the workouts so, it almost felt like, why aren't you making me do 700 jumping jacks and burpees? And because that's generally what you're told to do. And I was being asked to almost s- slow down, ground,
mm,
and, like, really feel into my body. And I think that terrified me because I think all I wanted to do was too much and a whole lot and eat too little because that felt safe, because it is everything that I had been taught and told and that we tell each other in WhatsApp groups.
I told you first find out your why. Who am I working with? And we've got to stop the fat gain before we could start the fat loss. And that took us a year. I think the first year you didn't lose anything. For anybody watching, this has been a long journey that we've been over. But the initial transformation on the physical level took about 4 years, I would say, a bit less, 3, 4 years.
Yes.
Of
Yeah.
which I would about a year was learning how to lose body fat. And then it was purely about trust and the roller coaster ride. Sometimes we're ahead, sometimes we're behind. It didn't really matter. What mattered was that we were going that way, even if we had to go that way a few times. I remember the first transformation where, not the first, but part of the bigger picture, where we got to your lowest, which was, and how did it feel then? And then we went backwards a bit, but I don't see it as backwards. I see it as kind of leveling out, because we went
Yes.
to the things of what you were capable of. I mean, this is where you are capable of going, but this is not where we live because it's too low.
Yes. Yes.
And remember, this was all done with no drugs, no stimulants, no fat burners, nothing but being in the gym, eating well, no overcommitments, missing sessions, nothing is perfection. We slid back as many times as we moved forward. We just happened to move forward and we slid back. I haven't always been her coach. I've just always been her friend at the end of the day. And that will never stop.
That is so true. That is so true. And I think just on that point where you said that, I feel that this was the first time that somebody was taking into account every aspect of who I was. It wasn't just my body, and it wasn't just a transformation. For the first time, it was the mind, the the human aspect. For the first time, I started understanding that, the role my cycle plays, and all, and that I do not come as just a body part. I come as a human being who's having a very real lived experience. And so sometimes when it feels like I'm going backwards, I'm just having a human experience. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that it is always safe to come back. Like, I don't have to run away. I have never felt like you would be like, and I've seen it, in a lot of cases where you go back to the coach and then they're like, now you're gonna have to cut out all of this food, and you have to run and you have to do all of this, and almost feel punished for being human. And I think what has helped me stop punishing myself is to see that I can still get results while being coached without punishment as a source of incentive. And that for me was so rare, because we live in a world where being human leads to being punished, and I feel like the body keeps the score on that, and that drives you further into a binge eating cycle, and then it's shame and all of these things. And I think, and I look at this year now with these two kickstarts that I've done with you, and looking forward to to longer term coaching again. For the first time, I'm remembering that this is not punishment. It
Nah.
actually, it does it ask for discipline? Yes. Does it ask for sacrifice sometimes? Yes. But is it a great joy? Absolutely, because of the way that I feel, and because of, it's my body remembers how great it feels when I make those sacrifices, which aren't even big. It's just choosing better for myself. It feels sacrificial, but it's just a higher choice. And I'm so glad I'm starting to see it that way. It took a
Yeah,
while, but
it's hard to explain to people because most people's experiences with coaches, I mean, there's so many fantastic coaches out there, but there's also many who come from a competitive background and they fail to meet their client where their client is. So the first thing that I do is put myself in my client's shoes. If somebody's obese and they're doing 800 steps or 1,000 steps a day, me going and asking them to do 2,000, 8,000 steps is unrealistic because their feet are going to get bruised. But nobody
mm,
thinks of, you know what I mean? So baby steps.
baby
Firstly,
steps are the fastest mode of transport.
yeah, and everybody thinks I'm slow, but I'm the fastest because at the end of the year, you don't lose what you've just lost. It was never faked. And I don't know how else to explain it, but it's everybody I work with is different,
Chaos.
and he's impressed. Because they see my transformations and they expect that I've got some secret, but I don't. With that what I wrote on diato, the Greek word, which is way of living or mode of living. The main thing to take away from that is not so much their diet, what it consists of. It's more the rhythm, the routine. They want to be active. They want to get on their bicycle and cycle to the vegetable shop. They want to be involved in their community. It's just the way they are. They want to be social. I want to be social. To me, that's come down to real life because I've been heavily involved in competition coaching, and I love it and I respect those athletes but they are athletes. But that's their passion. From a very young age, as long as I can remember, my mom was a type 1 diabetic. So that means get home, you get vegetables, maybe a little bit of rice, and a protein source. Everything's weighed, everything's measured, everything's cooked a certain way, because she has to inject insulin. So I don't remember ever having a normal way of eating other than Christmas Day, or whatever festive day you might celebrate. But for us it was Christmas, and that was the big day. Walking around the shops after a tantrum, I didn't get a sweet. That wasn't my reward to shut up. And then at the age of 13, I got into bodybuilding. So I was eating for function 24/7. And being ADHD, you'll understand. I was diagnosed when I was younger, in my teens. I was diagnosed as a young adult. I was diagnosed as an older adult. The diagnosis kept coming. Never with depression, but with, how did they word it? Trauma. Because of my background as a paramedic with, 5,000 active duty hours, and what I've seen and what I've done, I wouldn't say compartmentalize that part of my life. It's just I'm really good when there's pressure and ugliness around. I can hold my calm and run into it. But in other areas of my life, maybe not so much. But that's my skill set. That's what I was good at. But that's the one gift. Like, my mom was never wealthy. We grew up poor. In other words, she was an admin. So we'd live at a flat, maybe pay rent, for that month, and then move because we couldn't afford the second. So we'd move like 12, 13 times in a year. So I never had the stability of a home. And then I think I couldn't finish my matric because the bursaries ran out, or what they used to pay. Circumstance dictated that I had to go live on my own, 15. So I was really living on my own then. So I've been self-reliant from it. That's where all the studying comes from, is this deep insecurity that I never finished this. So I overcompensated and studied everything about the human condition. Before battling my own then obviously I became a professional athlete, which my ADHD, this was one of the great things about ADHD was, I think I took up pedaling to do the Doozy Canoe Marathon, which was more endurance focused. And I turned to whitewater pedaling, which is the more extreme, running these dangerous rapids and so on. Within 8 months, I was a professional. And I was hunted down by an American company. And I had to go over there. And that was the next 3 years of my life, to come back to training military pilots. Now, this was all long post-apartheid era. Most of my childhood was post. So 94 would have been when I would have matriculated in the handover. I think it was like handover. But the real transformation of the country, I think, happened mid-80s. About there. I was involved with about 2 bomb blasts. The one at the Ranch Show was the most vivid, which I'd finished a 48-hour shift, and that one was about 20 meters away from me. So we felt the realities of that, and my boss at the time, he was arrested and exported off
Wow.
the country because he was feeding footage to BBC in America, I mean, in the UK, to get the word out, what's happening here, so that they could. And my uncle, the top director of photography. So I grew up in the film industry. I used to go to his set and sit there. So I grew up in a world that was, everyone was accepted. The film industry. You are who you are. And that was my reality, and that was my uncle. That was how I grew up. And the one thing my late mom left me with was
Mhm.
empathy. So she didn't even have money, but she left me with empathy. Because she would give the shirt off her back. She would catch 2 buses to go see my grandfather with dementia,
Wow.
while the rest of my family, who did have money, would go once when they wanted to, you know? So that's where I come from. Coaching's always been in my blood. I was helping and advising people from a young age. Then I got educated, and then formally started 2014, 2012, I think, where I started actually accepting money for it.
Awesome.
And I think and it continues to evolve. I continue to study higher and higher grade stuff, branching out. My niche is 35 to 65-year-old woman. And it's it, like nobody gets into fitness you know, and I just find the hormonal system fascinating. I find the mental
Mm,
psychology of fat loss fascinating. Because it's a symptom, it's not a
mm,
cause, you know? That's where the first year came from. I wanted to find out the cause. Only way you can do that is trust. Trust you've got nothing as a coach, you know? You can't do that at scale. So I can't have 150 clients, and you've got to have
mm,
you've got to give them the time to gain trust. And even on the group and Seeking, every question that was answered, there were just 100 opinions, which would just confuse a person. I would look at them. What are they asking? I would answer it. No, DM me. No, nothing. What is the question? What is the answer? Leave it. I just did that. That's all I did. And I've done that wherever I go. I'm not there to get work or whatever.
wow.
Marketing is my worst thing. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed helping people. So I suppose my own selfish
Yeah,
way, I got a
around
kick out of it.
110 kilos. Yeah.
Because it helped. Ma- Your journey
That is
itself,
correct.
you started
And my
110,
lowest was
just below.
50, around 58. Yeah.
And we
And
got to the
now
lowest
we are
was
currently
62.
at about
I'm going off the top of my
66.
head.
Drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing is when I joined the Kickstart that you did this year in June, was it June, July 2025? I was at about 77.
Yeah.
And and after that Kickstart, I just continued with the plan that you had given us for the Kickstart, and knowing that this
Yes.
Kickstart was coming and that in December I'm going premium. And yeah, I'm now it's an 11 kg loss. I haven't since I was 57. That was 20. I think that was 2022. or 2023. And yes, it was 2023. Since then, I obviously I was having so many battles with my mental health, and I wasn't being coached by you just financially, and not even financially, because I know that uh, if I really need help, I can reach out to you. But because of what I was going through, I couldn't reach out to anyone, and so I was just kind of retreating from life in and of itself. And since then, I was just kind of, going up, and but always knowing what to do when I needed to. So doing just enough to not go back to 110, doing just enough, and then, slowly just finding my way back. And at the start of this year, I had the plans that you had given, and it's you remember what it is that I didn't. I remembered what it is that I did in the gym, and then when that kickstart came out, I was like, that's it. Here's my chance to to really focus and to get back in there, and it's amazing the snapback has been, and I'm not, and I mean, I'm just following the plan. The calories are still, when I started eating according to plan, I was like, it was back to that thing of, oh, this is so much food. Until now, it's slowly settling, and I'm like, okay, it's the right amount of, it's the right amount of food. But the snapback has been so, I'm even shocked at how I look and the way that I feel. And I'm never beating the Ozempic charges. And I'm like, if you know me, you know that outside of food, coffee, and water, nothing
Results of the
enters my body. I've tried all of them, and I'm not saying Ozempic is good or bad. I don't know. I don't know either way. All I know is I have found what works. Yes. And I've chosen to lean into this direction. And also because of my mental health, I'm just wary about doing anything that is
It's a good
outside
thing.
of food, nutrition, gym, movement.
I think you've proven to yourself before that it can be done without it. I do think that the new wave of medications are a good thing. I think it's one of the biggest breakthroughs we've had because it works on your neural pathways as opposed to everything before it more being stimulant based. So, it would always work through some sort of stimulation, which inevitably caused anxiety or depression or something like that. Where this attacks it at a neural pathway level, and it's the cravings. It's where you would usually crave something, you just don't. Not because you're not hungry. Even if you are hungry, you don't crave it. It's the most bizarre reality. And at first, I was very against it. And there's a big disconnect between prescription, implementation, and outcome. They have to have somebody tell them how to mitigate the side effects. It's not the drug. If you go from eating 3,800 calories of a terrible diet to eating nothing, you are going to suffer malnutrition. You suffer hair loss. You're going to have nail loss. Now, and it's expensive. So until that becomes cheaper, so that the broad aspect of people can access it, we really need it. But yeah, I think I think that 80-90% of the population is going to be on it very soon. What's coming down the pipeline? They researched a lot for fat loss. That's the primary objective. And by default, they have found its reduction on inflammation, its reduction in joint health, reduction on dementia, Alzheimer's, its obvious. The same cravings that drive emotional eating drive drug addiction, drive alcohol addiction. So it's a miracle for them too. But doctors can't prescribe it yet for those outcomes because you've got to prescribe under FDA what it is for. That's outside of its prescriptive. So those studies are ongoing, and then that'll allow the therapist, doctor, to be able to prescribe for outside of obesity or type 2 diabetes. But I think it's going to, I think in some shape or form it is going to be a treatment for a lot of things. Now, in biochemistry and the human condition, there is no gimme without a gotcha. As much as it takes your want away from this, that same pathway is your libido, is your craving to ambition, is your, and we've now taken that away. So now we've got this flatness that some people feel when they're on antidepressants, you know, that, that especially the manic bipolar disorder type medication that makes you feel very flat. There's no excitement. There's no, that's kind of what I was diagnosed with, which is trauma, not PTSD.
Well, I guess, you know, we're always learning, and I'm always learning from you. And you know, the great thing is sometimes I'm like, can you spoon feed me? But it's a simple thing, like what I was saying on the on the group, that, you know, bringing in that last meal and bringing my first one, and how I'm able to adhere so much better because my
What?
food tastes better, that I've started looking forward to that particular meal because I enjoy it. And then bringing in the other variations on other days. But at least I know that, you know, a couple of times a week, I get to have this, and it feels fantastic. And um, and it's just, it's, for me, I think it's the empowerment aspect. And I didn't see that in the beginning as empowerment. And now I absolutely do. I feel very empowered, to the point where, if I know that for some reason, you know, I'm, you know, I need to budget, and I can't be coached by you for a season, I know I'll be okay, because you've empowered me. You've empowered me enough to live it. And it's that one, and it's like that one thing that you said in the kickstart prior to this one, when you said, make
Oh, yeah.
decisions like a health seeking adult. I don't know why it landed so hard for me, but it made all of the sense. It just, and it's not just nutrition, it's all of life. So when I'm in a situation where I am at an event, or like the past 2 weeks where I have been at events, it's just a matter of, I know, protein first, you know, continue to drink my water, move, get my steps in, at least get my workouts done. And as a result, I'm not falling apart and letting life consume me, because I'm able to make in the moment decisions that are the best decisions possible for my health. They might not be optimal and they might not be perfect, but at least they carry me so that I don't feel like I've gone all the way back to begin, like in Snakes and Ladders.
That's kind of my philosophy in coaching, is I try to make a distinction between, you get self-help, you know, hoorah, and people need that, you know, that upliftment. And then you get empowerment, and they're not the same thing, which people get confused. Empowerment is supplying you with a tool so you can go do the work that self-help positivity books are wanting you to do. That's what I try and supply. Is every interaction you have with me, I will try and supply you a tool or a way of living, but it's not mine.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want you to live my life because it's your life. I just want you to understand the principles you need to employ. How you spin them is up to you.
Mm.
If you spin them, you'll get to your goal, you know? And finding your true north is number one on my list of key health habits. If you don't know why you're here, you don't know where you are going. Why are you doing this? You know what I mean? It's like you've got to know that. That's the first thing you've got to establish. And that's hard for a lot of people. A lot of people come to me, especially when they're obese, they're people pleasers, they come from traumatic backgrounds, because obesity is the symptom. It's not the cause. And until you stop band-aiding the symptom and start treating the cause, whether I have to be part of a multidisciplinary team with a psychiatrist or a psychologist, fine, I'll do that. Whatever needs to be done. And then you develop their healthy relationship with
And
food.
then they give up.
And once you've got that, that's one goal sorted out. And we move on to the next one. And it's a blessing and a curse because people join you. And the first 2 weeks, I haven't lost 100.
I was reading one of the art. I think it was an article that you sent me a link to. It was many years ago. I can't remember, but in it, it said that if you really want to see if a plan is working, you actually need to give it 2 years. Like, and it was referring, it was some science study that they did where they said you can't do 30 days. You can't do they were like, to see, for your body to fully, yes, you'll see results. Yes, you'll lose the weight, but for you to see the true effects of maintenance and to be rooted and grounded, that I think it was a peer review article. They said you actually have to give it 2 years, and most people don't even want to give it 2 months.
I would say 2 months is the minimum for a female. Now, that's just on a purely biological sense. Not a philosophical, not an identity basis. It is, I have to know because those are how my calculations have worked. It's just, so from that basis, we've got to understand the hormonal structure of that human being. How is their weight fluctuating due to things that are out of their control? The inflammation of PMS, the menses. And for men as well, but for women specifically, that cycle plays such an important role in how they gauge progress because they are consistently looking at the scale, and weight loss does not equal progress. Never has, never will. And that's what I try from the very beginning is I do not try and hook you. I can easily drop 10 kilos off a frame in 2 weeks. We do that with water drops and so on with weight drops or powerlifting athletes, with competitive athletes to make weight.
Yeah.
But it's not fair.
And the thing about trust is that it's built, and I wish people would give themselves the chance of building that trust. Because it feels to me like when I joined the first Kickstart and I started seeing my muscles already, my body responding, and you said it's always just been there. It didn't go away. And it's beautiful to know that my body now at its base knows knows where home is. And home is not decrepit and it's not falling apart anymore. Home is strong because the foundation that we've laid is solid. And so no matter, I can wander and travel, but I know that I've got a solid foundation that I can always return to. And my hope is now, I think with this part of my journey, with you and also with myself, is to not have to keep leaving home to come back and to move with home. Now that my mental health is at such a healthy, stable place, and I'm starting to understand how it works, and with the diagnosis, understanding how I work, is I don't want to be the comeback kid. I just want to yes, imperfect, yes, all of that, but I want to stay. I don't want to come back anymore. I don't want to rebound. And that is what I'm working on now is yeah. Yeah.
You, as long as we have
Yes.
you here to stay. We trust. We know after all, between me and you, we've known what we've been through. We've known last 10 years,
And
longer,
and
and we've known the last two,
and,
and
um
we've always helped each other out,
said,
you know,
I might
been
sound like
there.
a,
And I don't think it's
but
going to stop
the reason
ever.
why, and
So,
I'm sure that they are not invalidating, like, I truly believe that they exist and that they're, I sound so cultish when it comes to you, is because it feels like for the first time I'm being coached in a way where m- my entire human condition is considered. And it's not just, okay, how many kilos do you want to drop and by when? In fact, you've never asked that question. You've never been like, we got to try and get you to this by then. Number one, because I'm not an athlete. I'm a human being who's just seeking to see the best that her body can be and become. And there's never been a, come, December's around the corner, let's get you, because I know the second that would happen, I would fall apart because my mental health requires steady.
coaching's a team effort. It always has been. I think people lose sight of that. Is that you've got to meet your client where they are, and you've got to work with your clients. You've got to learn from them. I
So
have
just
to
for
learn from
vibes,
you
I want to add, while you're
24/7.
saying that, that my day 4 workouts current, that is the kind of training I like. I, if you look at this week, you will notice the things that I'm skipping in the gym. I for some reason I lean towards the and I call them traditional, but that's probably the wrong word. But your deadlifts and your, you know, yes, machines,
Mm.
but the second it's bands, and I don't know what happens, but my brain checks out. You'll see the that's why Friday I can do from finish to the end. Yeah. For the first time, Craig Brown, I feel like I'm an actual adult. And it that might sound ridiculous for a 42-year-old woman to be saying, but I read somewhere recently that says, as an adult, you need to be growing in two directions. You need to be growing towards your younger self and healing those wounds, but you also need to be growing in the other direction, which is making responsible decisions, which is doing the hard things. And for the first time, I feel like I have a body and a mind and the emotional stability to actually deepen. So it's not about going anywhere, it's about deepening the things that I've always been doing, but I couldn't get any depth in because I quit quickly because of a nervous system that can't go deeper. It is, I want to deepen my health, I want to deepen my work. So I guess it's depth that I'm leaning into and maybe not height. And I feel that, with creating depth, height will naturally sort itself out. I don't want to be a tall tree with roots that are unstable. And I feel like where I'm at now, and even with you, is I'm deepening my roots. And so even with my business, it is growing at a pace that I
Yeah.
can healthily keep up with and not sabotage, because I am, for the first time, I can trust myself and I can be trusted with responsibility. And I feel like before I couldn't. I'm paying off debt. I am making wise decisions. I'm investing in myself. And I feel that you are such an important investment because this level of coaching feeds into my work, even into my relationships, how I'm showing up in the world. And so, where to now? Deeper, deeper, deeper in my work, deeper um in my health, deeper in my, you know, understanding of everything that it is that I do, and leaving no aspects out, and even deepening my human connections has made a huge difference.
I want to ask you one last question. Roll back a few years. At your low, what is one thing you would tell that somebody who's in that position?
Something that you told me last week. Last week I told you that it's a ridiculous week. Staying up until 11 o'clock working and waking up again at 2 and 3 to prepare for the day, because it was one of those weeks where the demand was so high. And I remember, trying to find shortcuts to navigating that week. And you said, shortcuts are never it. Okay, not in those words. I'm definitely butchering and paraphrasing what you said. But you said something else, and you said how life is a dance, and to understand that, at some points you lead, and at some points, you need to be led. But I took it further for myself and realized that I'm able to give more in some areas, which is the work, and I needed to give more in that area, and I know that I needed to take a little from other areas. Okay, I'm going to make sense in a second. I think what I would say is to myself, first and foremost, is the age old saying of this too shall pass, firstly. But secondly, consider it a dance, or like a symphony. And like right now, and in that moment, you're not able to give as much in everything, and to have grace for that, and to almost be, I'm trying to think of the way to put it, but I wish I had surrendered a little bit to that sadness and allowed myself to learn whatever the lesson was, because what I was doing was fighting back and kicking back, and my body went into deeper fight, flight, or freeze. And my go-to is freeze. I froze. And the harder I fought, the more I froze, and the harder I fought, the more I froze. I wish I had just surrendered. And in the Kickstart group, we were speaking about how we've lost the art of being bored, and how that is boredom is one of the greatest ways to heal your nervous system, and also one of the greatest ways to see that your nervous system is safe. Because a lot of people can't stand boredom. We jump out of our skins. We have to do something, doom scroll, or fill time and space with something, because boredom has become terrifying for us. We can't sit in stillness. And my psychologist was saying the same thing, that we've lost the art of embracing sadness
So
and darkness, and we want to jump out of it. And it's in the act of jumping out that we further stay there, instead of just sitting in it and allowing it to move through you. And I know that if I had done that, I could have just gone through the motions of everything else. And instead, I froze and couldn't move, to the point where I could no longer even be in my own skin. And I wanted to no longer be alive. And I think that is some of the things that I'm also reclaiming. It's the very fine and really sacred space of boredom. And it's okay it's a symphony. Sometimes you are playing, an upbeat tune, and sometimes it is morose, and allowing for all of it. And I wish I had just allowed myself that moment to be sad and to sit in the dark, because I was like, why aren't you happy? Why aren't you happy? And that's not the point.
it
The
sounds,
point is to feel everything, or at least to be, yes.
but not, but no,
Yay!
allowed yourself to go or don't live there is what self hope taught me. I'll put in the links below how you can get hold of Hermien for any professional work
Yay. Perfect.
in both
Yeah.
the corporate world, business
And
speaking
employee
about mental
and
health,
basically like belonging in the
about
workplace. But
depression.
apart from that, wow, that felt so natural.
Yeah, I'll put that. Otherwise, goodbye for now to everybody